Let me repeat that. So 6:35 p.m. I'll call the Board of Selectmen, Monday, November 2nd. I'll call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded. Notes are being taken for minutes by Gail Hunter. Before we get started, we have a lot of agenda items, but I think we'll move them along fairly quickly. I have a couple of comments to make before we get started. First, we lost a member of the community back in September, Bill Vachon. Bill was a member on our Manchester Energy Efficiency Programs Committee. He was responsible for driving a lot of the green grant work that we've done in the towns and at the schools. And he was an active member of his church and very active in the community. So he will be very much missed, and we'll have a moment of silence for Bill Vachon, who's a long-time volunteer for the town. Okay. Next item, a little bit of an announcement that this is already posted on town website, and we'll communicate it more thoroughly later on. The governor announced some changes aimed at restricting COVID transmissions. This was today in his press conference. These changes are effective, I think it's Friday at 12:01 a.m., so Saturday, realistically. There are 2 or 3 different changes. One of them has a relatively high impact for people. So one is an instruction that indoor recreation facilities, restaurants, etc., have to stop doing indoor service at around 9:30 p.m. or at 9:30 p.m. 2 is a stay-at-home advisory. So this is from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. It's not a mandate, it's not an instruction, but it is an advisory, and it's aimed to communicate to people that they really need to control the partying that has been going on later at night. There's evidence that a lot of people were out partying on Halloween all over social media, and this is something that's not going to help us in limiting the COVID transmission over the next few months. And the last one is more impactful. This is a mandate, it's an order regarding masks in public. Face masks, face covering is now going to be required in public. There are no exceptions for social distancing in any public spaces. So this means indoors or outdoors, out in public, you must wear a mask effective essentially on Saturday. It's intended to simplify things, to avoid parsing of when and where you can't don't need to wear a mask. And so that's the major thing. So when you're out there with on the sidewalks in the street, you're going to have to wear a mask. All right, item number 0 on the agenda. If anybody has any comment that they wish to make on any item on the agenda which is not on the agenda, I'm sorry. If anybody wants to make a comment on something which is not on the agenda tonight, raise your hand and I'll give you a moment to make a brief comment. Okay, I'm not seeing anything, so I'm going to move on. First item is a public hearing for liquor license transfer for Harrigan's JK Inc., doing business as Harrigan's of Manchester by the Sea. May I get a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Got a second?
Second. I was muted, sorry.
Yep. All right, all in favor, Mr. Turner, Mr. Bodmer Turner, sorry.
Thank you. Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
yes,
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. All right, so this is a public hearing for a transferred liquor license for Harrigan's. Harrigan's has been, the business has been purchased, and the liquor license is being transferred to the new owner. So we have all the paperwork. The paperwork seems to be in order. Any questions or comments from the board?
I have a question.
Yep.
There was included in the paperwork a copy of Gary Leonard Saulnier's passport, and I'm just, if he was included, is there a reason that he was included, but his name is not anywhere on the application? Should it be?
Mr. Chair, my name is Joe Devlin. I'm an attorney for the applicant. Greg and Jane Soliner, it's only included on there because it was, they sent over their passports together. There's two other locations that are being purchased from Mr. Chase, and Greg Soliner is the manager of record on one of those, but he is not involved in the Manchester one. I saw that today. We probably should have put a piece of paper over it, but we handle a lot of paperwork, and I apologize.
Nope,
That's
I
all
just
right.
wanted to be certain something wasn't, I missed something, so thank you.
Sorry about that.
Any other questions from board members?
Will the entity retain the name of Harrigan's?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, if no other questions from the board, I'm going to ask if there are any comments from the public or questions from the public. Raise your hand and we will recognize you. All right, I am not seeing anybody here raising their hands. So can I get a motion to close the evidentiary portion of the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
second,
All right, any discussion? All in favor, Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
yes,
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. Can I get a motion to approve the liquor license transfer for Harrigan's JK, doing their business as Harrigan's of Manchester by the Sea?
so moved,
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Just one question. When will this become effective?
This has to go to the ABCC, and usually takes about, I don't know, at least 4 to 6 weeks, could be longer. They're doing their renewal. You're doing your renewals now, and then they get all the renewals in December, plus it's the holidays. So it has to go, an investigator takes a look at it and then runs the criminal histories of the people involved. I mean, it's a process. So we probably won't close until, and I think if we hadn't gotten it approved before the beginning of December, we would close in January at the request of Mr. Chase, just so that he can wrap up the affairs of it and be ready to go. We'd be ready to start in January.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor, Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
yes,
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. Welcome to town. And
Thank you.
good luck.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Okay.
All right. Item number 2, a public hearing for conduit construction on Proctor Street by National Grid. Can I get a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor, Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. National Grid, who's presenting? Matthew?
Yep. Hi, everyone. Good to hear from you again.
Evening.
Um,
How are
So this one is for Proctor Street. This is a customer job. It's kind of like a peninsula off of Proctor Street. The gentleman's building a new house out there in addition to a house and several other buildings on the property. And to be able to feed all that, we need to install a transformer for that customer to feed all the buildings on his property. And to do that, I need to attach to the primary, which is out on Proctor Street. The manhole that we would be going into is directly in front of the customer's driveway. It would be, I'd say, 20 feet or so from his driveway to the manhole for us to get into. And we would be the customer rather would be installing conduit into that manhole for us to pull primaries to his new transformer.
All right. Questions from the board?
So who's doing the tear up of the street? Is it
Our
National
civil-
Grid or is the customer?
So at the beginning, on the customer's property, his contractor is going to install conduit on the property up to the property's edge. Our civil contractor is going to take it from there. We don't like customers breaking into our manholes with live primary. So our civil contractor will then continue the conduit construction from the customer's property into the manhole.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Absolutely.
So you will be opening up the street.
That is correct. There will be one trench going towards the manhole.
When do you anticipate doing that?
Customer's contractor is digging trenches for conduit on the property this week, I believe. The electrician told me that last week. So in order for me to get our civil crew out there, it would probably be within the next 2 weeks.
Okay. And then you'll be doing hot top to patch that up before the winter closes in.
Yes, that is correct. And I did talk to the DPW director a couple of weeks ago, running through all this with him, Chuck Dam. So he is aware of the job.
Okay. Other board members?
I have a few questions. One is, if you'll be patching the road this fall, and there are issues from the patch, will you be coming back in the spring to neaten things up if they need to be?
If that's an issue, Ms. Jakes, any one of you board members can certainly reach out to me and I can get in touch with the contractor and have them make a repair, definitely.
Another question is, are there any large trees in that area that may be affected?
No, it's a straight shot right from the edge of the property and into the manhole.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other members of the board?
Yeah, just a couple of questions, Eli. Are you going to have to close the road to do this, or is this just like half the road? Your traffic can get by.
It should be just a closure of half the road.
Okay, that's fine. And what is the total time that you think this road is going to be, only half passable?
I'd say it's a day's worth of work. It shouldn't be
That's-
any more
yeah.
than 8 hours.
Okay. This is not a heavily trafficked area, I don't think so. Okay, but
No.
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So Ann, you're the only one left. Do you have any questions or comments?
And you're muted.
Good on that. Yes, no questions. Thank you.
Okey doke. All right, members of the public, any comments or questions on this, since this is a public hearing? Unmute yourself and introduce yourself, and I'll recognize you. All right. And can I get a motion to close the evidentiary portion of the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes,
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. Could I get a motion? Oops. Chuck asks, just ask that they do a DPW road opening permit so they can track progress and trench. All right, hold that in the motion. So can I get a motion to approve the request by National Grid to do conduit construction for 27 Proctor Street under the condition that they get a DPW road opening permit and return the road to in as good or better condition from when they found it.
So
So
moved.
moved.
second.
All right, so I'm gonna say Jeff moved and Ann Harrison seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes,
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. All right, moving along. Thank you, Matthew, for joining us tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week.
You too.
You well.
All right. So we have agenda item number 3. We have committee appointments for the Conservation Committee and for Open Space and Recreation. So we have one applicant for Open Space and Recreation. Let's take that one first. That's Sheila Linehan. Could I get a motion regarding to approve Sheila Linehan to join the Open Space and Recreation Committee?
So
so
moved.
moved.
Second.
All right, so I'll say Ann Harrison moved that and John Round seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, Mr. Bodmer Turner, Mr. Bodmer Turner.
Yes. I have to speak up louder when I'm muted.
Yeah. Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes,
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. All right. Now for Conservation Commission, we have 2 candidates for the one spot, and one was Allison Sellers that we interviewed a few weeks ago, and the other one was John Judge
Judge.
2 weeks ago. So I'm going to open it up to members of the board for discussion.
Yeah, Eli, I'd like to make a couple of comments. I was a little torn when I saw both of these candidates, and I looked at the situation, and I also had to look at where the Conservation Commission was in terms of its membership and what's going on. And I'm an advocate for John Judge for 3 reasons. One, I think that conservation is certainly integral to his professional life and indeed in his current position. In fact, I would call it central. Second, I think that this particular position, given some of the issues that are coming up, really require an appreciation of what's going on from a conservation perspective, and also from a public policy, development perspective. And Judge has had both of those, obviously, in his current position with the AMC, but in previous positions, dealing with as the planning director for the city of Springfield. And third, I look at the projects, in particular 40B, what's coming up, and the fact that we're going to have to hit the ground running from a conservation perspective in terms of the issues that are associated with that. I don't know if the developer for that has had much experience developing, doing 40B developments in uncharted territory, in areas where there aren't any abutters. Most of the projects he's done, I've got a feeling, have been in urban situations where he's had different challenges. And we need someone who can hit the ground running with this. And I think that Allison, with all of her enthusiasm, that's great. But I think in the next 3 to 6 months, we've got to have someone who's been down that road several times before and has opinions and knows what makes sense and doesn't make sense. And I think the judge could probably get up to speed a little bit faster than she could. I know that there are 3 slots that are coming open for the Conservation Commissions next year. And one of these slots start, I think, June 1 or July 1, I think. I'm not sure whether the 3 people that are whose terms are up will volunteer to enroll again. But I know that there will be openings that will be coming up. But that's why I think John Judge is probably a better person for that slot at this point in time for the Conservation Commission.
Okay, thank you, John. Other members of the board?
Sure, Eli, if I may.
Yeah.
I agree completely with what John has just said. And, we always are so greatly and deeply appreciative of anybody willing to volunteer to help out, as Allison has done before on Concom. But I think for one of the reasons John said the 40B, but additionally looking at potential modifications in the LCD, as well as climate change issues that are coming up and that we need some strong guidance on, all of which, given that Mr. Judge has been involved with conservation for so long, he brings, I think, what would be an invaluable perspective to Concom and the town. But I would again like to say that I am so appreciative that Miss Sellers, my apologies, is willing to continue to try to get involved in town.
Thank you, Becky. Mr. Bob Turner, comments and thoughts?
I had a slightly different take on this. While Mr. Judge's experience with the Appalachian Mountain Club is pretty amazing. He is very much actively involved in that and continuing to run operations there. And his 2 years on the Springfield, in Springfield, working with these issues is also a very important qualification. I was concerned in his interview that when I believe you, Eli, asked him a question about the properties in town, that he was not really aware of what the properties were, and that have been considered under conservation or been considered for such a designation. On the other hand, Ms. Linehan has been researching this and been paying attention to these things. I think that she brings a fresh perspective to this, and I would actually support her candidacy at this time and consider bringing Mr. Judge in when further openings come onto the Concom.
Ms. Harrison. You are muted.
I lean toward the position of Mr. Round and Ms. Jakes. I think Mr. Judge's qualifications are outstanding, and he can figure out what's going on in town very quickly. And I appreciate that he has a mixture of the pro for conservation on the Appalachian Mountain Club side and having worked in development in Springfield. I think he would be a very, very strong member, and I'd like to see him on sooner rather than later.
Okay, so my opinion. So I also am very much torn about these two candidates because they're so different. Allison Sellers represents a lot of what we want in our committees, namely enthusiastic, interested, and engaged people. And but at the same time, I tend to agree with Mr. Round's position. We do have some fairly significant things coming up in the next several months with the 40B, and I think his qualifications are outstanding, and honestly, I think we could benefit from having somebody with that breadth of experience on the Conservation Commission right now. We're going to need strong advice from people who have a lot of experience with municipal works, and I think that Mr. Judge is going to be better positioned to give that to us. So, can I get a motion?
Yes, Eli, I move to elect John Judge as the next member of the Conservation Commission.
For term to June 22nd. I mean, June 2022.
Yes, that's correct. He's filling out a slot that someone who has left, correct?
Yeah. Can I get a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, roll call vote. Mr. Bodmer Turner,
No,
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. All right, so we'll thank Ms. Sellers. I feel bad because she's been trying to get into this particular slot. And if we get another opening on this board, I think we want to go back to her because except for Mr. Judge's entry into this, I definitely would have been in favor of putting her on the Conservation Commission.
Agreed.
All right. Not too bad. 7:04. We're moving on to the town building ADA compliance review presentation, which is item number 4 on the agenda. And Mr. West, I see you have rejoined us.
Right, and my colleague Anna Julian as well.
So what I'm going to ask is for you to introduce yourselves and explain a little bit about the presentation you're going to make, and I'm going to make sure that you actually can make your presentation. I guess
Okay,
I'm going to be co-host, and I'll bet that that will allow you to actually present.
Okay, Anna, do you want to start, or would you like me to? Or?
I can start, but I cannot see the presentation.
Okay, give me just a moment. Let me just share my screen.
So while they're getting set up, this is Greg. Just to introduce this for a minute. So Sue Brown, through her efforts, was able to obtain a funding from the state to allow us to conduct self-evaluation of our ADA compliance and accessibility. And so we were able to bring on board both David and Anna through the Institute of Human-Centered Design to do this analysis and inventory of our buildings, as well as our outdoor spaces. And so what you'll be hearing tonight is a presentation. It's a summary of a very in-depth inventory and study of our facilities, with many recommendations for how to make them more accessible for those with a range of access issues, so that we are accessible to every and all. So with that, David and Anna, I'll have you go.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Anna Julian, and together with David, we are going to go over our findings for the self-evaluation and transition plan. So before we start, I just want to give you a brief introduction of who we are. So next, please. So the Institute for Human-Centered Design is a 40-year-old international education and design nonprofit dedicated to enhancing experiences of people of all ages, abilities, and cultures through excellence in design. Our scope of work includes education and training on accessibility and universal design. We provide technical assistance. We are one of the 10 ADA centers around the country. We are home to the New England ADA Center, and we provide information and guidance under the Americans with Disabilities Act. We also provide consulting on accessibility and inclusive design, design services, and research, contextual inquiry with user experts. Next. Okay, let me make this small. The scope of work with the town of Manchester by the Sea included the evaluation of programs, services and activities, which is the infrastructure for the policies and procedures that support programs access. We also did the evaluation of facilities, and together with the policies and the facilities, we provide a self-evaluation report, which identifies both issues that need corrective action and gaps in policies and procedures. Next, please. The evaluation of programs, services, and activities. So Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act requires that state and local government entities, in this case, the town of Manchester by the Sea, do not discriminate against people with disabilities in their programs, services, and activities. So the town must take steps to examine their programs and establish a plan for compliance with the ADA. So first of all, the report of the policies, practices, and procedures that we provided to the town summarizes our findings of the ADA Title II compliance. And the information for that report was obtained by an online ADA questionnaire developed by us and submitted by 9 departments, and also documentation emailed to us, including comments from the ADA Advisory Committee. So the key recommendations, those were based on the requirements from the Title II of the ADA. So designated a responsible employee. We found that the town has met its obligations to designate a responsible employee by appointing the town administrator as the ADA coordinator. Grievance procedures. The town has a grievance procedures form for members of the public, but what we recommended is that they distributed to all departments heads, and also that the form be posted in each of the town's public buildings. Next, please. The ADA notice. The ADA requires that a town provides a notice to let members of the public know that the town does not discriminate to people with disabilities in their base of disability. So the town has a notice, but what we recommended is that they distributed, they put the note in all the materials distributed to, by the town, and post the ADA notice and copies in public locations in the town's buildings. Regarding reasonable modification of policies, practices, and procedures, we recommended that the town employees provide information to members of the public about the process of requesting reasonable modifications of the town's policies when appropriate. And also to ensure that the form for requesting the modifications of policies is on the town's website, and also that the town let members of the public know that the town is committed to provide copies in accessible formats upon request. The employment, reasonable accommodation. Regarding employment, we found no evidence that the town has failed to provide a reasonable accommodation when requested. And finally, the effective communication. We recommended that the town clarify procedures of providing effective communication, and also to ensure that the town's website and other web-based services are accessible to people with disabilities. And for that, we provided a web accessibility report with a list of all the accessibility issues. Next, please. We surveyed 7 municipal buildings and 9 outdoor areas. And the basis for those surveys, we surveyed for compliance with both the federal and the state. So for compliance with the 2010 ADA standards for accessible design, and compliance with the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board. And we provided recommendations based on the one that provides more accessibility. The deliverables. For each building that was surveyed, we provided a building report and a building catalog. The building report includes the basic information about the building, location of accessible entrances, accessible exits, toilet rooms, etc. The key accessibility issues, and the order of magnitude cost estimate. And the cost estimate was only for material, no labor or design was included. And together with the building report, we provided a building catalog, which is a compilation of accessibility of non-compliance elements for each element. So each record in the catalog included a photograph, the floor and location information, the list of issues with measurements, if applicable, possible remedies, and the cost estimate. And now, David, I'm going to let you go through the accessibility issues.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Let me get the screen to advance here. There we go. As Anna mentioned, we surveyed a number of municipal facilities, including The locations shown here, the town hall, the police station, the library, both floors of Seaside 1, the fire department, the wastewater treatment plant, and Crowell Chapel. In terms of some issues that we saw in municipal buildings, beginning with town hall, the image at the left is a room where audio communication is integral to the use of the room, and it therefore should have an assistive listening system and a sign indicating that the system is available. There are different ways to achieve that. There are, for example, portable systems that can be used at multiple locations. It's important to keep them in operable working order and ready to be used and that kind of thing, but you could get a system that would be used in the town hall when necessary, and perhaps in a function room in the library when necessary, and handle it that way. Also, town hall with parking spaces. The one shown here does have a sign, but you also need a marked access aisle, and parking follows basically an equation based on the number of spaces in a lot. But when parking is provided, you always begin by at least needing one van accessible space with a marked access aisle and sign, including the sign that says van accessible. The next image shows an exterior ramp that has some issues. Among the ones that are clear in this photo is that it lacks railing extensions. You would want extensions at the base of the ramp going towards the landing that extend at least 12 inches. Then the next image shows an interior access route, particularly with that lower counter down, it's reduced to less than 36 inches. The service counter on the lower row doesn't have a lower section, so it's too high and not easily usable by people who are short in stature, or most people use a wheeled mobility device and that kind of thing. The toilet room image, what we call the lavatory, the sink, it has exposed plumbing underneath. This is a very easy and inexpensive fix, but for people who don't have feeling in their legs, they can burn their skin on those pipes if hot water is going through them, if they're not wrapped, and not be aware that they're injuring themselves. And in this case, the paper towel dispenser is protruding from the wall. It wouldn't be detected by a person who's low vision or blind using a cane. And so it's interfering with the circulation path in the toilet room and should be relocated. And then the image with the signage, this is an issue that comes up a lot. There was no tactile egress signage, so that someone who's low vision would be able to tell by reaching to the latch side of the door that they were at an egress door. And when a door like this proceeds immediately outside to an accessible route, Massachusetts also requires, along with the illuminated exit sign, an illuminated international symbol of accessibility, the wheelchair symbol, that would be up by where the exit sign is located as well. Some more issues with municipal buildings, specifically the police department. The first image here, we should have directional signage to the accessible entrance. And then at the top row, we have a high service counter again, or I could say lack of 36-inch max height accessible service counter. The male holding cell lacked a 60-inch minimum turning radius and had some other issues as well, including what's at the bottom right. That toilet and lavatory setup is not accessible. It doesn't have knee and toe clearance at the sink lavatory portion of it, and it's lacking grab bars, for example. And then this bathing room, there was a bathing room provided, but an accessible bathing room wasn't provided. And I think I can see in the photo that that lavatory also has unwrapped pipes. Continuing with what we saw at some other buildings, obviously not too far away as the crow flies, but the wastewater treatment plant. Here we have some accessible spaces that are lacking the identification sign, the sign with the international symbol of accessibility. At the top row, we see some stairs leading up. I think this is to the teen area in the library, and they have open risers, and the ADA doesn't allow for that. You should have closed risers in that situation. Again, an interior access route that's reduced to less than 36 inches moving through the library. That can be addressed just by shifting some things around. Door hardware, and in the toilet room, this is a big issue, particularly in a lot of older buildings. We see door hardware here that, as we often say, can't be operated with a closed fist. It requires tight grasping, twisting, and twisting of the wrist, and that's not a good kind of door hardware for people who have arthritis or a weak grip and that kind of thing. And then the signage, the designation signage on those two doors on the bottom right, they're not located properly at the fire station. They should be on the latch side of the door. And if they're permanent rooms, they should have braille and raised characters, because again, that's where someone with low vision knows to look for the sign. Here are 4 single-user toilet rooms, none of which were accessible. The one that strikes me as a bit of a difference is Seaside 1, in the area where they had the really lovely antique fire equipment museum. There was an accessible single-user toilet room, but going up to the offices where there unfortunately wasn't an accessible route, but there also wasn't an accessible toilet room up there, and that's the toilet room that it's showing, and I think it lacked accessibility because of lack of turning space. But where toilet rooms are provided that are used by the public, you always want to have an accessible toilet room. And we were told it was a particular interest at the library that they'd had people who were, changing their children, like in the children's section out by all the books and that kind of thing, because there just wasn't enough room in the existing toilet room, and the librarians were particularly interested in having an accessible toilet room there that was available to members of the public. So key recommendations for buildings and facilities. We always think about approaching and getting into a building. So we want to ensure there's an accessible route from all site arrival points to areas in the building where programs, services, and activities are provided. If parking is provided, you're not required to provide parking, but if it is, you need to ensure that compliant accessible spaces are provided. When toilet rooms are provided for members of the public, as I just said, we need to ensure that there are accessible toilet facilities. And it's important to ensure compliant signage is provided, particularly these 3 categories: designation, directional, and egress. Continuing with some key recommendations at the police station specifically, as I mentioned, the male holding cell lacked the minimum required turning radius that someone who uses a wheeled mobility device would need. The same was true. It also, there wasn't a compliant lavatory toilet combo in the female or juvenile holding cell, and they also lacked the necessary turning radius. And there was no excessive bathing facility in the detention area. And if people are going to be there for any time, that's something you would want to provide. Now shifting to some accessibility issues we saw in outdoor areas. With all of the beaches, there needs to be a firm and stable accessible route to, if it's a salt water, if it's an ocean beach, to the mean high tide level. We also, and that's typically achieved through a beach mat. We often also recommend, as a best practice, extending beach mats at an angle off the main path to create sitting areas for people who are in beach wheelchairs or who use walkers or just otherwise need a more accessible route. With all of the parks that you see here and the cemeteries and so forth, we also want an accessible route to all of the elements in the park. Whether it's the outstanding memorial of, Pershing's aide greeting Lafayette, or getting to any element, the baseball fields and so on in the parks, in the tennis courts and basketball courts. You need an accessible route to the edge of sport activity and to all of the amenities in the park. An important issue is on the left here. Massachusetts, within a playground, Massachusetts does not consider engineered wood fiber to be an acceptable surface. That's under the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board 521 CMR that Anna was talking about a little bit earlier. In situations like that, we recommend poured in place rubber to connect the elements within the playground. Playgrounds also need an accessible route around the exterior of them. And then of course, there has to be an accessible route into the playground. And then we just see some elements in parks that need to be accessible and on an accessible route, so that a picnic bench is kind of stranded there without an accessible route to any picnic bench in that area. And a picnic table, I'm sorry, and that table is not accessible. It doesn't have knee and toe clearance, or there's some different designs for them, but there's no space for someone in a wheeled mobility device to be able to access the table in the same fashion that others would use it. It's a bit hard to see, but there's a bench that's not on an accessible route, and a bike rack that's not on an accessible route. And then an important issue at many plane and sport areas, here you see a dugout, and we need an accessible route to the player seating. And we also want a firm, stable, and slip resistant 36 by 48 minimum space at the end of the bench. So someone who's with the team or assisting the team in some way, if they use a wheeled mobility device or otherwise need it, they would have a place where they can sit. And you need the same thing at bleachers. So people who use wheelchairs, for example, can join their friends and be with their companions and view whatever sporting activities are taking place. White Beach again, and Black Beach. In fact, all of the beaches, there was the issue of having an accessible route to the mean high tide level and across the sand. And again, that's usually focusing on a beach mat. Again, we see, excuse me, a picnic table that doesn't have basically an extension off one end or a space at the seat for and knee and toe clearance for someone in a wheeled mobility device. And it's a bit hard to see, but the image for Pleasant Grove Cemetery is showing a water spigot. And once again, we would want to have at least sort of geographically distributed within the cemetery, and at least one and up to minimum 5% overall. You want to have accessible hardware on the spigot, so someone can turn the water on and off with a closed fist if they want to water flowers that they brought or something along those lines. We also sometimes make what we call best practice recommendations. These are things that are not required by the ADA standards, but that we feel would enhance the usability of the locations we surveyed for all users. A common recommendation we make in cemeteries is to consider placing some benches throughout the property, so they're places where people can rest and pause and contemplate. If it's not provided, particularly if it's a place where there's a lot of foot traffic from cars, an accessible on-street parking space can be very useful. I believe we were showing the parking space at the town hall also to suggest that there be accessible, an accessible space for vehicles that have to charge, electric vehicles. And that means that the charging station needs to be on an accessible route and in a way that someone can approach it from both sides of the car, and that the controls are within reach range, because as I'm sure you know, there can be, for example, drivers who use exclusively hand controls and would be in a wheelchair and would want to use the charging station, so they need to be able to get to it and reach the controls for it. And then at both the beaches, again, we would recommend finding a way to designate an accessible parking space near as close as possible to what would be the accessible entry point towards the water. So key recommendations for outdoor areas, just as with buildings, ensure there's an accessible route to all elements in the, so you want to be able to get to everything that's in the park or outdoor space, and ensure there's clear floor space adjacent to team seating. Again, as we were mentioning with the baseball dugout, and spectator seating, which is typically found with bleachers. In terms of some of the materials we are providing for you, there's a self-evaluation summary report. And then very importantly, there's the transition plan database. This is delivered as an Excel spreadsheet. It has essentially all of the information that the catalogs that Anna was referring to earlier have, except for the photos, but it identifies issues that need to be corrected. It identifies what the issue is, what the remedy is, has measurements. Yes, it does have measurements, and it has some information about cost. And then we also include some basic priorities in terms of what to approach first and so on. And this is then sortable. It really becomes a working document. And as Manchester by the Sea thinks about what things it's going to remedy and when it'll have the budget to do so, you can adjust the priorities to your needs and sort things in different ways, and begin checking the things off you get done, and thinking and planning for the things that may take more time or additional funds over time to address. So the self-evaluation and transition plan goals is that all the town's programs, services, and activities, when viewed in their entirety, are readily accessible to and usable by people with disabilities. We have the priority of ensuring program access with the goal of equal participation of people with disabilities. It helps to have an implementation strategy integrated into the town's planning and budgeting. And the overall goal that all residents, regardless of ability, feel that they know about and can participate in all that Manchester by the Sea has to offer. And I would just add one thing here: as you begin addressing accessibility issues, if, for example, you make a surface at a park fully accessible, or make an entry somewhere accessible, or anything along those lines, be sure to let people in the town know, because they'll want to be able to take advantage of the improved accessibility as it appears in the town. IHCD also, if folks in Manchester by the Sea are interested, can provide some additional trainings. We can provide some training specifically on the requirements of Title II of ADA, the title that brought IHCD to your door, I guess, the responsibility of cities and towns. We can provide some training on effective communication, talk to you about how to think about developing a good policy that will work well for you and for the people in your town, and how to address different issues that can come up when there are requests for effective communication. And we can provide a training that's a very popular training on plan reading. I know we find sometimes there are people in towns who are expected to make decisions that involve their evaluating floor plans and blueprints, and sometimes those individuals don't really have any experience with knowing how to read those documents, and we can provide a training on that if it would be helpful. So thank you, and I'm going to try to minimize this PowerPoint reappear, and Anna and I also would be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Okay, thank you both for very well organized, nice presentation. Board members, what we're doing here tonight is we're getting to, we will be holding a vote to accept this report from IHCD. And in just a minute, I'll let people start asking questions, including if there are any questions from members of the public. But I want to clarify one thing. One thing that we're not doing here tonight is we're not actually prioritizing or discussing the planning for how to address the different findings in the report. That is going to be done over a period of time. It'll probably be prioritized by town staff, perhaps working with the ADA committee. So it's not on our plate tonight to actually address or redress any of the issues here. So with that, questions from members of the board?
I have a very general question, which is the breadth of recommendations is expansive and also costly. And as motivated as we may be to move towards compliance in a rapid way, what kind of time frame are we looking at that this has to be addressed?
Oh, sorry.
Well, Anna, feel free to chime in if you'd like, but there's no hard and fast timeline. Common sense would suggest that some of the things can be addressed just with labor you have available from employees in the town, and begin by looking at some of the things we identified that you can do easily. But for the things that may amount to a capital expense or that are going to need more time, we sometimes look to settlement agreements that the DOJ has as a timeframe guideline. Again, this isn't a settlement agreement; it's not what you're specifically dealing with here, and so they aren't completely guiding what you have to do. But we think of overall timeframes. I think of 3 to 5 years. Is that right, Anna?
Yeah.
At least for the things where unfortunately, I think cities and towns, we don't know what we're facing. Well, you never know for certain what you're facing budget-wise, but obviously these are scary times, I think, and we don't know what's coming around the corner these days. But overall, if you can think to sort of that 3 to 5 year time frame for the more expensive or difficult issues, we think that's sort of a good common sense and safe framework.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other members of the board?
My question is more for Greg, perhaps, but is there any handicapped accessibility to the police station?
There is through Town Hall. So you have to come through, up the elevator and enter from the interior of the building. But one of the recommendations is to provide that, I'll call it the bridge from the newly accessed porch, the front entrance to Town Hall, and getting over to that entrance to the police front door, if you will.
Yeah.
And so that's actually, we submitted a grant based on, now that we have this study, we're eligible for some state funding to start implementing some of the recommendations. And so we have submitted that to the state, and we're hopeful that we'll be successful in getting the funding to move forward with that piece in particular.
I asked because I happened to be down at about 5 and talking to a woman who had parked in front of the blue doors at the lower level, which are locked. There isn't signage that makes it obvious that you have to go around to the side, up the elevator and across.
Sure, yeah.
And in the short term, would there be things that we could do to make it more obvious to someone who was trying to get into the police, what they should do if they couldn't use the stairs at the front steps at the front?
Sure, and like you say, signage alone would be a good step forward, and those are the low cost things that we can move forward with. First.
Right.
So this provides us a good list of the things that we can do, and as David said.
I didn't see anything about access to the police in the report. I saw toilets, I saw bathing facilities, lack of turning radius, but nothing saying, if you were in a wheelchair, how would you get into the police station?
The building report has the recommendations for signage, for directional signage when you are in front of the police where the stairs are, to either the ramp, which is on the left side of the building, or downstairs also to provide signage. So
It-
the police report has those recommendations for signage,
Okay,
for
Thank you.
directional signage.
thank you.
Mhm.
I have no other questions.
Other members of the board? All right. Well then, what I'd like is to get a motion from somebody on the board to accept the ADA compliance review report from IHCD.
So moved.
I get a second?
Second.
Eli,
Discuss-
there was one question in the chat about, is there any,
Sorry.
yeah, any immediate, situations that are of danger that you would just really flag for us? David or Anna, if you have
Yeah.
something stands out as something eminently that we should do sooner rather than later.
David, I think the route at the seaside building.
Well, perhaps, right. When we surveyed Seaside 1, it was a wintry day. And to get into the fire equipment museum area, there is a route around the back and a door, from what I remember, a power door. But it wasn't maintained. And what I mean by that, it was pretty icy, and it wouldn't be required. It wasn't actually a ramp. To be a ramp, it would have to have a slope greater than 5%. But it did gradually rise off the ground, and I believe we, as a best practice recommendation, thought that you might think of edge protection, so keeping snow and ice off of it and putting a bit of an edge there so people wouldn't slide off. Would be a good idea. It really, in terms of, I'm not sure I recall anything that was literally dangerous, but two things do come to mind at the library that the librarians mentioned to us. What I said earlier, they have a great desire for an accessible toilet room for patrons of the library. I guess they, particularly the people who bring children, it creates some real issues for them. And then something that wasn't required, but they really wanted, and we mentioned this in the report, it would be a power door at the, not the main entrance, not the huge doors, but the door around the side that opens into the children's section. I guess it wasn't, so it didn't require so much opening force that a remedy had to be there. But they mentioned that they get a lot of, for example, seniors with walkers and book bags and so forth, and they find it really difficult to open and maneuver at that door. And just as an enhanced usability or best practice option, they were very much hoping that a power door might be installed at that location. But to go back to the first part of your question, Anna, you may recall some things I don't, but I don't recall anything that was literally dangerous that you need to get to tomorrow.
Yes, the other thing that we noticed were the slopes at the common, the area in front of the town hall, but we really didn't look at that much because we were told that there is a study going on or something that to develop that area. So, but that's something that if you are planning, that should be a priority for the town because some of the slopes were steeper than the maximum allowed. So that's.
So the good news is we have finished that. That project is done.
Oh, okay,
congratulations.
that's great. Congratulations. Yes.
So we do have that. We can check that one off.
Okay.
As well as,
Oh, good for
as
you.
well as
Okay.
the parking spaces next to that ramp.
Oh, great. That's
Oh,
great.
great. Oh,
Yeah.
that's excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might have a follow-up question, Eli, and I guess that's brought up to my mind just based on the conversation we just had. Adam and Anna, do you have any kind of prioritization with regard to all of these things on the to-do list? I mean, obviously, as any community, we would probably gravitate those which are easiest to do and cost the least amount of money, et cetera. but does the ADA have any kind of opinion with regard to your findings about here's what's most important because most people need this more than others, or independent of cost and ease? Although feel free to factor that in.
You want to answer that, David?
No, go ahead. I think you're pretty good at this one.
Okay, well, there are the spreadsheet that David was talking about, the Excel spreadsheet, we divided into 4 priorities. So
Okay.
we put priority 1 would be the things that you are required to do to provide program access, especially if you cannot relocate the program to an accessible location. So all those things that are priority 1, we recommend doing it as soon as possible if you have the possibility to do it. And then we put priority 2, anything that has to do with signage, all this egress signage, directional signage, designation signage. We put it under priority 2. The toilet rooms are under priority 3 if they are accessible but need some modifications. But if you don't have, like at the fire station, for instance, they receive members of the public and they let members of the public use the toilet rooms. So in that case, the toilet rooms, at least one single user toilet room should be priority 1 to provide program access to those locations. And then we put under priority 4 any additional access that you may think will improve the usability of the building. But really the focus is to provide program access. So anything that is under priority 1 should be addressed soon.
Okay, so that exists in the report. That's good. Thank you.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay, any other follow-up from members of the board? All right, I'm going to ask to redo that motion. Can I get a motion to accept the ADA compliance review report from IHCD?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor, Mr. Bodmer Turner? Muted?
Yes.
All right. Ms. Jakes?
Yes.
Ms. Harrison?
Yes,
Mr. Round?
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. All right, well, David and Nana, thank you very much for your time here tonight. I'm sure that this will take us a little while to chug through. I'm sure you're used to that. And again, thank you for your efforts.
Oh, you're very welcome. And then
Yeah.
I just want to say that we finished all the surveys and everything, but we are available for any question that the town may have or any follow-up or anything. Feel free to contact us.
Right, or if you need any of the trainings would be helpful. And if you're starting something new that we didn't know about and want to ask us about it, which I think Anna was essentially just saying, feel free to be in touch. We'll always try to help out if we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Good night, folks.
Good night.
good night, thank you.
All right, so we're going to move on to agenda item number 5, which is a COVID-19 local business support. So this is a relatively constrained agenda item tonight. We basically have some ability to do some fairly direct support for businesses with some limited amount of funds. We can do this using our donation account. We have already put effort into supporting our restaurants over the past several months. This effort would be targeted at providing some support to our retailers. We have been able to do grant opportunities for micro businesses, and now the state's offering grants to both micro enterprises and small businesses with less than 50 employees. So over the next, so there's been some effort working with merchants and Erica Brown. And there are 5 different opportunities that we could help out with using some of our donation account. One of them is local businesses participating in the new Cape Ann Bridge Cape Ann Facebook page. Features stories and videos of local businesses. This site has a lot of followers and it's focused on businesses on Cape Ann. Costs $30 a month. We could offer to pay the first 3 months for local businesses wanting to join. There's about 25 businesses times $90 is $2,250. Second is local shopping spree raffles. We could provide $250 local shopping cart as a free drawing for each of the next 4 months. Cricket would run full page ads for how to enter and win, featuring retailers and restaurants in town. That's $1,000. Third item would be Cape Ann winter lights. Businesses throughout Cape Ann would decorate their storefronts with special maps showing all those participating. There's no charge for that. Fourth would be shop local promotions. These are 3 full page ads promoting local businesses, and this is $1,050. And fifth is Christmas by the Sea support. That's supporting the Cape Ann Chamber, and that's $300. So to stress, these are funds that are the only way we can do this is not using taxpayer funds. We're not allowed to use taxpayer funds for this. But we are able to use our donation account. Donation account, the total of these would be about $4,600, and the donation account has over 14,000 in it right now. So the question before us tonight is, are we interested in supporting these measures and funding them through the donation account? Okay, so questions and comments from the board.
I have some questions, Eli.
Go ahead,
if I
Becky.
may. I was just curious with the full page ads, where are these full page, what periodicals are these in?
So this would be the Cricket, sorry.
Okay,
I didn't explain that, but so yes, this would be focused on the Cricket. It's heavily discounted from Erica. She's offering significant savings to us and is providing a lot of support gratis from her perspective, which is greatly appreciated. And
yes, she's done a whole lot.
And working with the businesses and reaching out with them to make sure this is all coordinated.
And have our local businesses expressed a lot of interest in the Bridge Cape Ann?
Well, I think there's growing interest. A lot of them did not know about it, but they are intrigued by it. And so, yes, I think it's fair to say that there's enthusiasm about taking more advantage of that medium.
I would just like to say Erica and the Cricket have been just fantastic through everything. These are great ideas, and thank you. That's all from me.
So with the discount, the value of what we're getting is easily doubled, if not even more. So I think we're getting a pretty large bang for the dollar here.
I think it's really nice, and I'm sure they're greatly looking for enthusiastically looking for any help we can provide.
So just a clarification, Greg, the full page ads that are going to be run on the local shopping spree raffles about entering, winning, and featuring retailers and restaurants in the town, that's different from the shop local promotion ads?
There is some overlap there, and I'll have to get clarification exactly how that differs, or are they combined?
Okay. These sound great. All of them. I mean, we've been trying to figure out how we could help the businesses in town, and you know, supporting local shopping is really a good way to do that.
I have a question, Greg. Obviously, speed is of the essence here because this has to hit before. I mean, like now.
Right.
It's
That's
really
the hope.
Christmas focused, I think. Is
Yeah,
this
I'm hoping
something?
to go a little bit beyond, but want to get
Yes.
it up and running before Thanksgiving here, absolutely.
Right. Okay. All right. If not sooner.
Right. So yes, and
Oh, okay.
again,
So it's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
That's the plan.
yes, exactly.
What do we have to do tonight to make this happen?
So if you're willing to approve the use of the donation account for this and to move forward with this basic plan, that is what I would be looking for. If one of you would like to be a little more involved and help guide it over the next few weeks, that would certainly be welcome as well. Otherwise, Sonia has been working hard with Eric and some of the merchants on coming up with some of these ideas, and with your vote tonight, we can begin implementing.
I would like to see that anything that indicates that you know, the shopping spree raffles, excuse me, et cetera, that they have a fine line designation that says no public funds were used, no taxpayer funds were used to support these promotions. I think it needs to be really clear to people that that's the case. And I would put forth a motion that we adopt all 5 of these proposals tonight so that Eric can start mocking up the ads for tomorrow.
I would second that.
Mm.
Can I make a friendly amendment that we make it fairly specific and say that we authorize the town administrator to expend $4,600 from the donation account to support the 5 measures in our packet?
Second that.
With the amendment that print advertising include a disclaimer saying that we're not using taxpayer funds.
Accepted. All right, so the motion is to authorize the town administrator to expend $4,600 from the donation account to support the 5 measures in our 5 local business support measures in our packet. Said measures to include a notification of the funds. Funding did not include any taxpayer funding. We'll take that from Jeff as your motion. Is that all right?
That's fine.
And second was from Becky Jakes. And any discussion? All in favor, Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Definitely.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes,
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. All right. All right, let's move on to traffic management. Item number 6 on the agenda, traffic management for Mill Street. Greg, do you want to introduce this one?
Sure. So the topic of how to best manage traffic on Mill has been floating around, kicked around for a while. We have struggled to come up with concrete measures that that'll make a significant difference. We have in the past had some temporary speed bumps that were used. Some thought those were helpful, others thought they were terrible. We have painted the center stripe and also the white lines on the side. Again, with some mixed results, but I think it has been a positive overall. Just it makes the road feel narrower, and hopefully people go a little slower with the lines painted. He recently approved the three-way stop at Forest and Mill. So that's brand new. Those signs are up now. So we'll see if they will have a positive impact. They should, at least for that immediate area around the intersection. And so what else to do? That's the question, and what's before you tonight to discuss what are some possibilities. And so, there's a number of things we can try. I listed a few in your packet. One, we could put up speed monitoring signs. Those tend to work, at least for a while, until people get too used to them and they're sort of in the background and they ignore. But certainly initially, they help remind people what the speed limit is and what they should be doing. We've had the discussion about not speed bumps, but speed tables. So speed bumps are not recommended. They're sort of an older practice. If people go too fast over speed bumps, they can become airborne. They can lose control. And so that presents a liability that we don't want to bring on ourselves or cause more problems. So speed tables are larger. They are raised areas of the road. So as the name implies, it's sort of a raised table area on the road rather than just a bump. It's a rise up, a short section of level, and then it goes back down to the regular elevation of the road. Those are best done at intersections and for crosswalks. That's where you see them used typically, and they can be successful in those applications. Putting them in the middle of a stretch of road with the hope of slowing down, they will probably do that. But like I say, you more typically find them used in conjunction with a mid-street crosswalk or an intersection where the crosswalks are raised and the whole intersection is raised so that pedestrians are up higher, they're more visible to the traffic, and it makes people go slower through the intersection for sure. Another possibility, it would require working with the country club, but maybe there's an opportunity to put a footpath sort of through the woods off the street. The road is very narrow, particularly on that, from Forest to the small culvert bridge. That particularly windy area through the woods there is very narrow, and there's really no room for a sidewalk. But there may be, and it's difficult, obviously, to walk on that section and feel safe. So perhaps there's an opportunity to work with the country club in putting together a footpath through the woods there. Maybe that's a project that we can perhaps get some volunteers to undertake and work with the country club on that. So that's another idea that might be worth pursuing. It was mentioned the possibility of making the bridge intentionally one lane at a time. So you would actually come to that small bridge culvert and stop on either side and then proceed after coming to a stop. Again, a little unconventional, but it would certainly force people to at least stop and restart in the middle of Mill Street. So those are 4 possibilities. And like I say, we've been hard pressed to come up with other ones beyond these. If you have additional ideas, you can certainly talk about them. So open to people's opinions and thoughts on how we might best proceed.
Board members.
I'll go first if that works. I'm less inclined to purchase more of the speed monitoring signs. The ones I see people routinely ignoring them. Sorry about that. So, and $4,000 for something that is only a seemingly temporary fix doesn't seem to merit. Plus, they'd have to have batteries because they're not, again, there's all so much tree canopy. I like the idea of the speed tables. I think those seem to work well. I really love the idea of maybe as Greg suggested, possibly an Eagle Scout project or something along those lines for a path along the edge of Essex County Club. But I'd love to also hear what Todd has to say in terms of his perspective on speed tables versus the speed monitoring signs. And lastly, I think that I agree. I mean, I agree with Todd and Chuck regarding a three-way stop at Forest and Ancient County Way. And I think that's something that's long overdue over there.
So we'll take up the stop sign on Forest at a future meeting. Todd, do you want to address Ms. Jake's question about speed tables? And
Yeah, I think Chuck and I had discussed that recently, and those are used more down in the south and overseas where there's not much snow. So I'm going to refer to Chuck on that to see what his thoughts are. They would work, I believe, but my concern would be the inclement weather and the snow and plowing and things like that. I do like the idea of the pathway or walkway around the bridge on Mill Street. I think that's a good idea. But as far as the speed tables go, I'm going to refer to Chuck.
Chuck, your turn.
So yeah, I think in general, I mean, I hate to say that something can't be done, because we can't plow. I mean, a lot of some of the consternation around, moving the curb lines around the Complete Streets projects was, plowing, and, eventually, the guys will get it, and we'll I think that's an initial problem, but it can be solved over the long term. I guess in general, my kind of hesitation to go full speed ahead with the speed tables is I don't feel like we've gotten to a place where there's full consensus in the neighborhood even that speed tables are the answer. Mm-hmm. And they're a lot harder to take out once we put them in than a speed monitoring sign. So yeah, the cost is, it will certainly be more for a speed table than it will for a sign, but the point taken that, it's what's the benefit per dollar spent, I guess, it's kind of hard to put a number on. So just for instance, we put out the three-way stop at Mill and Forest. A day later, I got a call from the direct abutter asking what was going on with the stop sign and why it was there. And then I, spent 10 minutes on the phone with him about how everything would be fine if we just cut down more trees on Mill Street, and that would, make it more, more safe, because then you'd be able to see. And it's like, well, then, I'm cutting down trees. So, I guess my point is there's no good answer.
Right.
And, so to circle back to the speed tables, I kind of think that, I've said this before to other various committees and everything, but the place where we would want to try a speed table out is at the elementary school where it crosses Lincoln Street, or at the middle high school where it crosses Lincoln at Vine. Mm-hmm. And then I feel like that's a place where people will understand it, they'll get it, because a lot of times we do things and it's the first time people have seen them, or at least seen them in their neighborhood, or their street, or whatever. And so, that, if I were gonna do a speed table that I would call my pilot speed table, I feel like in front of the schools is the perfect spot for that. So I hesitate to, put them out in the middle of nowhere on Mill Street and have people, see them for the first time out there. But anyway, that's just my perspective. So I think that, like you said, we will have issues with the speed monitoring signs with they won't be 100% solar no matter what I do. So there will be a battery issue. And then I think the walk seems like a good thing around the country club. Beyond that, it's just one of these roads that's developed this kind of, notorious.
I've got a question about the speed monitoring signs. And so they cost $4,000, but then you own it. And can that be moved around?
Yeah, actually, we have moved the one over by Sweeney Park. Sometimes doesn't get very good sun in the winter.
Okay.
So we've moved that down to Raymond Street, and then
well,
it's not there anymore. But so yeah, they are semi-movable. I mean, they're pretty heavy, so you don't want to.
Right.
But I wouldn't. They're not so easy to move that I'd move them every week. But every 6 months.
Yes.
Not a big deal.
And I understand with speed monitoring signs, everybody's guilty. They feel guilty about it when they see the sign and they say, "Oh, I'm going too fast." And over a period of time, they become immune to that. And then pretty much everybody, a lot of people don't pay any attention to them. Time to move the sign. And Mill Street's a long street. And there are lots of places where you could put a sign like that and perhaps move it to another slot, and that gets people's attention all over again. And that's not a street that a lot of people are watching what you're doing.
Todd, have you looked into the trailer mounted ones as well? They do have like smaller trailer mounted ones.
Oh, all right.
Usually police station, police people have them. I haven't priced those out just because it hasn't come up, but that might be another option.
Well, for next year's budget, I did put in for a speed monitoring trailer, and that would be a trailer with the radar speed sign and also a unit to measure traffic flow and types of vehicles, similar to our passive traffic counters that we already have.
Are those battery and solar, or just one or the other? I see a number of those around. And a lot of times there's no seeming life to them.
They are battery operated with solar.
Thank you.
Well, I know it's kind of an intractable challenge we've got here, and I'm just suggesting maybe a sign that might be moved every 3 months or 6 months when you feel all of a sudden, well, it's not making too much difference to people around this corner. Let's put it on another corner.
We used to have the speed trailer. It worked really well, but I think in 2016 or 2017, it was so old that they didn't make parts for it anymore, and it was too costly to fix. So that's one thing that I am asking for this year's budget.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. How about the idea of making the bridge single lane? How much would it cost? Do we do it as an experiment and take it away when everybody screams? What are the alternatives? That might just make that much less, sufficiently less attractive as a shortcut that people would go around elsewhere through town rather than cutting through Mill Street.
Say all the time, paint's cheap. So we could paint that very, very easily. Make it, hash out whatever it ends up being, a couple feet on each side of the bridge. So it's very clearly one lane across, and the only thing we'd have to do is wait on signage to come in. I think, it certainly would work for a while, but then, obviously people might get used to it. So I would not want to put a physical barrier there just for the, obvious reasons of snow and, the police and fire response, but paint's easy.
Todd, do you have any comments on that option?
I agree, and I did speak to a few residents down on Forest Street and Mill Street, not Mill Street, Forest and Loading Place in that area, and they do seem to think that the paint that's already down there has slightly worked in slowing vehicles down. So paint could be a good option.
I'd say on the paint slowing people down, it's, it's perspective, obviously, but also, it's slowing down the people that aren't trying to speed. The people trying to speed are going to speed no matter what we put down there.
Yep.
Might even be
Well-
true of speed tables. So
If you
it's
had
just the
a s-
honest person that doesn't realize how fast they're going.
if you had a stop sign at either end of the bridge, so that it really was inconvenient. Not a lot of people speed through stop signs, I hope.
I have no, it's certainly something we could do.
It's cheap.
And then it's just a matter of
Mhm.
how many people adhere to it.
Is this the bridge that's close to where School Street is, or is this in the middle of the road? I'm trying to, because Sawmill Brook goes under it twice, I guess, Brooks do. I'm trying to put.
I think we're talking about the one closer to the Forest Street side.
Oh, okay, that's the one with Cat Brook.
Yes.
I'm just looking at it on the map. Okay, so that's kind of in the middle of the.
It's basically in the middle. Yes.
Yeah, it's in the middle.
Since we wouldn't be able to even put in a speed table on Mill Street until the spring, I think that the idea of putting stop signs at the bridge, it'll get people's attention. Probably a lot of complaints, but I think that that makes some sense in terms of just slowing people down as they go into, if they're headed towards Forest Street, as they go into the woods, and they're not flying through there as well. I don't know how much impact it's going to have moving from Forest to School Street on Mill. I think people just roll right through it and keep going. I wanted to raise an issue that has to do with stop signs that were voted on last meeting on October 19th by the board for Harold Street. That was voted on by the board to put in stop signs there, and I was wondering why that hadn't been implemented.
So there was some, just a hesitation in both, just a look at whether or not other intersections would be more appropriate than that one. But I think from my feedback from the board is that no, we ought to stick with the Herald and Forest. And so we can go forward with that.
And when we talk about 3 signs at Ancient County Way, there's already 2, correct?
No, I think
there's one on Forest Street going out towards 127.
Yeah.
And there's one on Ancient County Way
Is there one there? Okay.
merging into Forest Street. So you're talking about adding a sign coming up Forest Street from 127, right at the intersection of Ancient County Way. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so. I wasn't actually sure about the one on Ancient County Way coming into Forest, if there was a stop sign there or not.
That is correct, Jeff. I believe that's what they were discussing, is adding that stop sign in that location.
So adding it on the 127 side of Forest Street, right before you pass Ancient County Way.
Correct, yep. So now that would be a 3-way stop.
So it would become a 3-way.
So I'm going to try and drag us back to the Mill Street agenda item. The addition of the potential of a stop sign at Ancient County Way and Forest Street is in our notes, but not actually in the agenda item. And that's something that we bring up and discuss formally at a future meeting. So I'd prefer to focus our conversation on the Mill Street topics. Other comments from board members on the Mill Street measures? All right. Do we have any members from the,
Eli, I'm sorry, I was muted.
okay, go
I
ahead.
did, I just would like to touch on both Todd and Chuck's comments about the lack of consensus on the part of, the neighbors around there. And so I just think that the simple methods at this point, the bridge, paint there, and possibly doing the path might be a good start. That's it.
Okay, so do we have any members of the public tonight who are residents of Mill Street who have a dog in this hunt? If you wish to make a comment, unmute yourself and identify yourself and I'll recognize you. Okay. So now we have to decide how to proceed here. A little bit challenged by the fact that none of the Mill Street residents are here tonight. So it's been observed that the speed bumps are not something that we could put in until spring. I thought that Chuck Dam's comment about the notion of trying a pilot project of a speed bump. Did I say speed bump? I meant speed tables. I wrote down speed bumps. I didn't say speed bumps. I did not mean to say speed bumps. I meant speed tables. Sorry. Speed tables. Try a pilot project of a speed table elsewhere. And it's also been mentioned that we don't necessarily have consensus from the residents on Mill Street, who were really the major proponents of this topic in the first place on speed tables. The issue for us, one issue for us, is if we did want to proceed with speed tables in one form or another next year or in the spring, that is something that we would have to fold into our budget discussions this year. So that's kind of an indication that we have a little bit more work to do with the Mill Street residents. And perhaps what we should do there is schedule a little working group with Mill Street residents and town staff, maybe a member of the Board of Selectmen, to discuss the speed tables and see whether or not there's consensus or is enough of a consensus to further discuss this in our budget cycle.
Eli, do we have a cost for speed tables?
I think it was 8,000 per. Is that right?
Yeah,
Greg?
Chuck estimated around 8,000.
Yeah, I've floated the idea to a couple of our contractors and consultants, and that was more or less what they kind of pegged it at. One other comment I would just,
and that's for Mill Street, right, Chuck? As opposed to something on Lincoln Street around the elementary school, which is narrower.
yeah, it was kind of independent. It wasn't a square footage cost, that it was just kind of a lump sum. This is what it should take type estimate.
Okay.
I just want to say one thing, Eli, where you were going with the consensus on Mill Street. I do kind of look at it as it's also going to be a town issue, because I feel like the second one is approved. However, it comes to be for Mill Street or wherever is going to be the model for whether it's Proctor Street or Masco or Beach or all the abutters are going to have an opinion. And so it could be become quite onerous to have speed tables all around town. That's kind of the way we're going with the speed bumps. So I just wanted to throw that in. So I agree that a committee and, you know, looking at it very holistically makes sense.
Okay. So, do any board members feel differently about this approach towards speed tables?
Mm-mm.
I think it's really important that we take into consideration the speed studies that Todd and the police have done on Mill Street and the speeds that people are traveling on Mill Street. I would agree with Becky's comments about the efficacy of the signs, but in terms of the approach you're putting forth, I think it's very important to get neighborhood input, but it's also balanced with the town's needs to slow people down on that street.
All right.
Just a quick comment, Eli. The 85th percentile on Mill Street on our last speed study was 34.17. I believe the posted speed should be 25. So it's considerably above the posted speed limit.
Okay. All right. All right, let's go move on to, so we have 3 other items here to talk about. And so one was the walkway. Let's talk about that a little bit. So it seems like a lot of people are in favor of the notion of the walkway, but it seems like it's also the one with the least clear path to actual success. So if we wanted to pursue that, that one actually requires us to have a benefactor from essentially from the golf course to the county club to support it. Correct, Greg?
Yeah, I need to double check the width of our right of way there. But my sense is that it would require going beyond the right of way.
So if we wanted to pursue that, then we have to go start negotiations with a private party to help us out.
Correct.
Can I ask, I don't want to get too far into the weeds on this, but can I ask where that walkway would start? Is it starting on the far end of the bridge going towards Forest Street?
Yeah, that was my thought. Just basically trying to navigate through the wooded, extra narrow, curvy section.
Okay, so people would then be, if you pardon the expression, dumped out right at the bridge onto the road.
Right.
I have a question, Greg. That's if you're on the south side of Mill Street. We can't do that on the north side of Mill Street. Is that other private property or something?
Yeah, again, it's I don't know the exact width of the right of way for the town.
Right. Well, one side is definitely the country club, the
Right.
county club, but the other side is undefined.
Well, yeah, it's multiple private property owners.
Okay, all right. So it's multiple people involved in that discussion.
So let me try to refocus on this. So it seemed like there was a number of people on the board who were interested in pursuing the walkways. Let us reduce this to just starting with that. Let's ask, do members of the board feel like we should pursue further look into mechanisms by which we could affect a walkway on Mill Street, sort of along lines of what Greg's talking about?
Eli, if I may, while do like the idea, and I think it's a really good idea. If what we're trying to do is traffic management, then maybe we focus on that.
Well, we can do them all in parallel. If you only want to do the other ones, we can. What I'd like to first get to is whether or not the notion is supported at all. Let's start with that.
I like the idea.
I like the idea.
Mhm.
Without playing my role as Donnie Downer here, that's a very complicated project to
Yep.
engineer.
Yes.
You've got Concom involved because of the stream. You've got Friends of the Trees involved
Just the trees.
because of the trees that are going to be cut down that may be within the right of way that Greg's talking about. Based on the town tree policy that we're trying to enact. I don't know that I would want to take that on. And then you've got the safety issues of, okay, people are now safe walking from Forest Street out to the bridge, but then they have to walk out onto the road because there's no sidewalk on the road on either side for the rest of Mill Street and on the bridge. So I'm not really enthusiastic about that idea.
Okay. All right. Let's put that discussion on pause for a couple of minutes now. Well, let's move on to the other one, which were the movable speed signs and the one-lane bridge. And let's actually take the one-lane bridge first. So one suggestion was made that we go ahead and try a temporary version of that, putting stop signs on both to see how effective it is. And it's cheap and it can be reversed. Is there a consensus among board members? Is this something that we might want to pursue? Let's do a little straw poll right now and run around the table. So, Mr. Bodmer Turner.
I think that's, I like that it's inexpensive. I like that it's reversible. And if we counted the stop signs between School Street and 127, it would be 4 stop signs. And that would be perhaps a deterrent for people cutting through that way. So I like the idea.
Ms. Jakes.
I do like the idea as well for the reasons Jeff said, and even if it just slows people down. And if we do that and we have stop signs on either side of the bridge, that might alleviate the need, at least temporarily, to create a path around the bridge. Because if there are stop signs on either end of it and it's one way at a time, then that hopefully is slowing traffic down to enable pedestrians to be more visible at that spot.
Ms. Harrison.
Yes, I like it.
Mr. Round.
Yes, I think it's low cost. Give it a shot. Let's see what happens. Very little downside on that.
Okay.
I'd like to suggest that if we do that, that we also have perhaps, I don't know, Todd maybe, and Chuck should weigh in on this for sure. A sign warning that a stop sign is ahead. Because if you're going 40 miles an hour, you want to make sure that you know that you're going to have to stop.
Yeah, we're gonna have to look at the sight lines leading up to the bridge for sure.
Yeah.
And then go from there.
But Todd, you and Chuck both believe this is an reasonably implementable plan.
Yeah, I agree. It'll be easily implemented, and we're already down there enforcing it more than we have been in the past. So I just make sure that the enforcement is maintained and stepped up.
Okay. Um, okay, so we'll come back to try to get to a vote on these items in a minute. Let's go back to the movable speed signs for a second. So in our notes, there was the possibility of purchasing one or two specifically for Mill Street, but I wanted to ask Todd. Todd, you told us that you're planning on putting into your budget a request for a portable trailer that has essentially what's being talked about tonight, movable
Yeah,
speed signs.
That is correct. That's one of my capital requests for FY22.
And for FY22, so the intended usage would be that you would move that around to different places in town periodically to help you enforce speed limits in town. Is that, and so it's not necessarily intended to be dedicated to one location. It's intended to be moved around as you see fit. Is that correct?
Moved around. It's a speed, what they call a speed trailer. So it's easily movable by a regular police cruiser.
Yeah. So what was really occurring to me was it might almost be moot for us to make a decision on or offer support for movable speed signs for Mill Street if this is already coming up in one form in the budget proposal now. It would mean that you wouldn't have a dedicated movable speed sign or a speed sign on Mill Street, but you would have something that we could put into play on Mill Street if that went through in this year's budget request.
Yes, that is correct.
So
ballpark,
maybe,
can we get a ballpark on cost, Todd?
About $15,000.
Thank you.
What's the cost of the fixed speed sign?
or
Isn't that about
4,000.
4,000?
Yeah, the ones that we have on like School Street and Pine Street were 4,000 each.
It's a lot of money for a trailer.
it is,
Well,
There must be something different there besides just a trailer.
well, it's a speed trailer that has a radar speed sign on it, but it also has the dedicated equipment that we can do traffic assessments as well, similar to our passive traffic counters that we can only use during good weather. This will be able to use year round.
Okay, so it does other things.
And how much is the photo violation option, Todd?
Exactly.
I did not price
My
that out.
question.
yeah. Oh, do that after I'm off the board. So
Revenue neutral.
So that's more. So yeah, that's more money. The thing is we've been having it, and I don't want to get too deep into a discussion about this particular budget item since it's going to be coming up in our capital budget discussions later on. The thing is, we've had a lot of discussion about speed enforcement in town, and I guess what I'm saying is it sounds like we're going to have a discussion around a version of the speed signs that would serve the purpose for Mill Street. And we have another option that we might like to try first that doesn't cost any money at all to speak of, which is the Bridge Street item. So I'm thinking maybe it might be a good idea to just defer the decision about speed signs or the static speed signs on Mill Street for now, in view of the costs associated with them and in view of the fact that we're not sure that they actually would have a long-term efficacy. So are people okay with passing over this one for now to wait till we get through the budget discussion on movable speed sign or the trailer speed sign that Todd's talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. All right, so speed tables are out. The walkway is complicated. So let's go back now to the one-lane bridge, which appears to have pretty good support. Can I get a motion to support the, at least temporary for now, implementation of a one lane bridge on Mill Street with stop signs on either end.
So moved.
Second,
Any discussion? All in favor? Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
yes,
Mr. Rand,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. So now we can just punt that off to town staff to implement and wash our hands of it. Just joking.
Go Chuck.
So let's talk very briefly about the walkway. So there's an outstanding question. Jeff, I'm very, I agree with you. That's why I said around, we don't have a clear path to how we would get to it.
No pun intended.
No, it's not. I'm actually, no. So if we wanted to pursue this, first thing we do is task the town administrator with finding out about the right of way on either side. And then finding out about the owners on either side that have to be involved if we need more than the right of way. Do we want to even, obviously, I don't think we're in a position where we want to commit to trying to execute on this. The most we would want to commit to tonight is seeking more information about this. Do we want to go that far? Do we want to give town administrator the job of pursuing the information acquisition that would allow us to further make a decision on the walkway solution? Or do we want to defer that? So that's the final question that I want to ask tonight of the board. Comments?
I have a question. What are we envisioning as a walking path here? Is this an asphalt path, or is this something would be very fine gravel or something? Or is this a walk in the woods? What is this?
I think it's not defined yet. Greg?
Because that affects your discussion, I would think.
Yeah, my thought was more just a walk through the woods.
Yes, that would be my.
Not an improved. It's a scenic road. We can't cut down the trees along the road, so this would be winding in between. The larger trees. There might be some small trees that would have to, a sapling or something that has to come out. But that was my concept.
And maybe put down some very fine gravel or something so that the walk is a little better defined, but nothing. It's all going to be very pervious. And
yeah, maybe wood chips.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, something.
Just an ADA discussion. I don't know.
Oh,
I'm serious.
another thing to add to the list.
Yeah.
the other question is, would that make the neighbors happier? Is pedestrian safety a major concern, or just slowing down the traffic in general? Because you have kids and animals who aren't necessarily going to stay on a path. So perhaps before we do anything else, we already talked about having some effort to get together with the residents on Mill Street, see what they're feeling about something as complicated as a path would be.
Mhm.
That seems reasonable. So that would be us putting together a neighborhood meeting with the residents of Mill Street to talk about two options, namely the speed tables and the walkway, and see whether or not there's continued interest in either of those.
I'm concerned that you're opening up a can of worms that starts to talk about sidewalks all the way down Mill Street, which is a much more costly project. What's that?
I don't think that's feasible at all.
Well, if you're talking about pedestrian safety, pedestrians are out on Mill Street when they walk all the way from School Street down to Forest. There is no sidewalk. So why are we concentrating on pedestrian safety on the Forest Street end of it? I think it's a big can of worms.
Which is a reason just to say we'll defer all discussion of the path indefinitely.
Or until we get additional information from how the one-lane bridge affects the
Yep.
affects the problem. Is that where we want to go?
I think so.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Who brought up the path to start with? Was this a local neighbors that said, why don't we do something like this? Or is this coming from
Yes, though one of the neighbors asked about
something like this?
something like, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I think we don't have the appetite to proceed that aspect of it right now. So, with that, I think we actually have our outcome from this meeting tonight. We may end up, for the Mill Street measures, I think we may end up coming back to this again, but we do have something concrete that we're going to give a try, and that is the one-lane bridge. So any other comments on the Mill Street measures before I move on to one other point in this topic?
I'm concerned, Eli, that you said speed tables are out. Are we?
I didn't, I probably was too strong with that. I think I said that we wanted to go to the Mill Street neighbors, try to have a meeting and ask them what their, if there was consensus among neighbors about whether or not they would support speed tables. And then we would come back to it, try to potentially discuss it in the budget cycle as to whether or not we wanted to do something there or do something as a pilot project. This is a somewhat longer discussion because of the other issues that it opens up with respect to whether or not it's going to bring on additional requests for speed tables. So I don't think I'd say that they're out. They're certainly out for this fall. That's what I meant when I said out.
Okay. So it's tabled until the spring,
Yeah.
not to run on puns, but
All right, we were done.
Oh, Jeff.
All right. So the one other item is, so there was a question or sort of a request from a resident on Forest Street about concern on fact there was parking on both sides of Forest Street, and then it was narrowing things, and there was this suggestion made or request made that we consider switching it to parking on one side only. And so I'm not right now in its current state really interested in bringing that forward as a formal debatable subject before the board. What I was going to suggest is that if because that's going to deeply affect the residents of Forest Street. What I was going to suggest is that we take it up at the board level only if we receive a petition with a significant number of members from Forest Street asking us to consider it. And at that point, we would bring it up in the form of public hearings before probably first an initial discussion, then public hearings before the board. So that's my intent, unless members of the board want me to put it on the agenda without going through that process. So this is your opportunity to pine on that.
I would agree with you, Eli.
I agree.
Ann?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. I will respond to the resident with that decision. All right, that closes out our agenda item number 6, which is traffic management on Mill Street. I will move on very briefly. I'm actually going to ask if we can skip over the liaison project updates. The only ones I can see really are the open space and rec and planning board. Jeff, do either you or Becky have reports that you want to make there?
No burning report.
Becky?
I can hold off.
All right. All right, now, agenda item number 8, town website update policy. So it's come to my attention that we don't always see when changes are being made to the website, and we have not actually got a written policy articulating it, although I would have thought it would have been kind of self-evident the way these things ought to work. But I think it's probably a good idea for us to articulate this as a policy of the board, either written or spoken. I'm leaning towards written. When changes are made to the website, there's various different parts of the website there that department sites like the DPW, and those generally are the purview of the department heads to make changes to. Ultimately, the Board of Selectmen really needs to have the final review authority on the website, since it's essentially the town's communication mechanism, and that's really our bailiwick. But we also have the various different sites for all the different committees. And it is my belief, and was essentially my understanding, that changes to all those different board and committee pages really should be done with the full vote of those boards and committees, so that it was done with consensus of those boards. And we never have really articulated a process or a policy for how that is done. But I think that it's important that we do at this point. And so I think that we should articulate a policy that says any changes to those websites are made with the consensus of the boards referenced. So they have to be done with votes of the boards, and that they're only done when the chairs give written instruction to the town staff, essentially CCing the town administrator, and that the Board of Selectmen is informed when changes are made. And again, that the Board of Selectmen has the final editing authority. So what I'd propose is that we actually do put this out as a written policy, and if I have the approval of the board tonight, I will write that up, and then I'll bring that back to the board for a first review and then a second review, the way we do with normal written policies. But so that's the first question. Do I have the support from the board to articulate that as a policy?
Do you need a formal motion to do that?
I would like a formal motion to do that.
I would move that we direct Eli to write the language for a new policy stating that changes to a board or committee's page on the town's website must come through the chairperson, and
In writing.
that the chair of the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator are CC'd on any direction in that regard.
I'll second that with a potential friendly amendment. Do we need to run this by town council?
No, no, this is a town policy. This is not a bylaw. This is something that's under our direct management.
I second.
Any discussion?
I didn't hear anything in the motion saying that the change had to have been approved by the board in addition to being presented by the chairman.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Is this informational or? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's part of what Eli's talking about. And
Mhm.
I mean, I don't want to write the policy in the motion, but
Okay,
the idea of the motion is, the intent of the motion is to have the board that wants to change their website discuss it, vote on it, and communicate through their chairperson to the town administrator and the board of selectmen.
that's absolutely fine.
I have a question, Eli, and maybe it goes to Greg. How often right now are things changed on that website? For example, DPW projects. Because I see that they have a to-do list. And is that changed every week or every couple of weeks or once a month or?
So it varies quite a bit from department to department. Overall, I would say, we need to up our game a bit in terms of making sure that things are very current from a departmental level.
Okay.
We could.
Yeah. I'm just wondering whether we're copied on this for informational purposes or for veto purposes, or does it wind up on our agenda that we have to approve all of these changes?
No,
And
so my intent here is that we're copied. It's for informational purposes.
Okay.
To give us the ability to use a review process if we so choose. So if
Right.
the board goes and makes some changes that we actually disagree with, we can go back and have the opportunity to ask them to modify those changes. I have no intent to force the Board of Selectmen to approve every change to the website. I just want us to be informed of them so that we don't find out about them 2 months, 3 months later, and then go have to sort through the mess.
all right,
I just want to make it clear that we should be informed at the get-go.
that makes sense.
And
We don't want to micromanage things here.
in regard to your question, John,
Yeah.
We're not talking about changes on the department websites, are we? We're just talking about boards.
I thought it kind of covered everything.
I mean, I would tend to broaden the notification to cover the department websites, but this could be debated as part of the policy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll just do the initial write-up to begin with. And the last thing that I want to say there is email addresses. So email addresses on the town website, as far as I'm concerned, we should never have any personal email addresses on the town website. The only email addresses that should show up on the town website are for, should be town email addresses. That's my opinion, and I want to know if I have the support of the board in that opinion.
Is this going to be part of the policy?
Yes, I think it should be.
Okay, I would definitely support that.
Are there personal are there personal addresses up there now?
I think there have been in the past. It is possible that there are some up there right now.
Okay. No, I agree with your comment.
There are some up there right now. I know. I'm actually looking right now, and that was one comment that was brought up at one of the planning board ad hoc committee meetings, and perhaps chairs should have their emails on the website. At least the chairs. I don't think that every single member needs to have an email, but at least the chairs, a town email. And I'm not talking specifically of planning board, but that way, yeah.
So that raises the issue of what boards should and should not have town email addresses and under what circumstances they should. And I'd actually like to address that as a separate
Okay.
topic, decouple the two. All right, so that's really what I wanted to get to tonight. So I'll write that up on that policy up and get it out to everybody. It'll be before you for the next meeting.
Mr. Chairman, we need a vote on the motion.
Oh, thank you.
Just to keep you informed about our process.
Yeah.
Oh, Jeff.
So we had a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes.
Thank you,
All
Mr.
right.
Chairman.
Thank you, sir, for keeping me on the straight and narrow. Okay, moving on to number 9, the 40B update. All right, so tonight in the 40B update, we're not going to be spending time talking about the specific things that we do and do not like about the 40B, or specific measures that we might, or specific concessions we might be looking for, negotiation points. What I want to talk about are the actual next steps that we're going to take, and schedule a few things. So some of the next steps we take, at some point we're going to be going to a point where we're going to be having a discussion with the developer and the board. Before that, we're going to have some meetings at the board level, and we need to schedule up when we're going to have those meetings and what we're going to try to cover in those meetings, how we're going to proceed through this process, and what we're going to do with our requests to other boards for doing things like fiscal impact analysis. So we did have a chat with legal counsel about the process. There were a few things that were pointed out there. One is around our terminology and what we're actually proceeding towards. Right now, our focus is on the outcome of the LIP, which is really, it is specifically in a letter of endorsement. So we've used the term in the past, a developer's agreement, a development agreement. It's actually technically not quite the right term about what we're discussing right now. What we're really discussing is whether or not we want to write a letter of endorsement, and if we do, what conditions we would place in that letter of endorsement. The thinking or the recommendation that we got from town staff and from town council was that we have a workshop meeting to go through the list of the bigger impact, the bigger issues and the bigger impact items, and start developing a list of things that we may want to ask for. And what would factor into this is, in part, information that we get from residents now that they've had their presentation, and start sending us comments that we can collate and put into that list. There was also an offer from the town council to work with Sue Brown to develop an initial list that we could use as input into that workshop meeting. And then after we've gone through that workshop, we can look to parcel out sessions with the other boards to task them with specifics. We might be able to do that in advance, and schedule actual meetings with the developer. And all of these are going to be public meetings. I want to clarify that we actually don't have an avenue here where we would have any executive sessions on any of these negotiations. Although they're negotiations, there's no land transfer, there's no contract. So there's nothing we actually hang a hook on for using an executive session to get advice from counsel on these topics. All of these discussions will be public, which is fine. The developer expects us to go through these discussions, and the developer has done this sort of thing many times before. There's no real surprises here. We are not going to be giving up much by going through these negotiations public and publicly, gaining and maintaining a lot. Transparency here is a very good thing. So I want to talk about when we might schedule such a workshop, and then ask board members for comments on if there are any specifics that we want the finance committee to be looking into, or the planning board to be looking into before we move into a workshop. And any other questions of procedure that board members might have. Greg, do you want to add anything to this?
No, well, let me just say that, so you issue potentially what you issue at the end of this phase. If you are successful in coming to terms with the developer, it's a preliminary endorsement with a series of conditions. So those conditions that, if you're successful, those conditions become the floor for whatever decisions that the ZBA may issue. They can go beyond what you recommend as conditions, but they can't go less than what you recommend. So it becomes, as I say, the floor of what any permit conditions are ultimately issued. It doesn't mean that the project is approved. So the ZBA could decide, even with your endorsement, that they don't feel that it is approvable. And if that's the case, then the developer can appeal to the state and go through that appeal process. And that's where things get very dicey, and we lose a lot of control at that point. However, it may be possible to have the developer agree to a condition in the endorsement that he would not challenge those conditions that you put in your endorsement if he is going before the state appeal board. So I just wanted to lay that bit of detail out for you, that indeed it's a preliminary endorsement. It doesn't mean the project is going forward. It just means that the project is able to go to the next phase, which is the ZBA permitting process, that comprehensive permit. And then at the end of that process with the ZBA, the ZBA is in control. They're making the decision whether or not to grant a comprehensive permit or not. If they do grant a comprehensive permit at a minimum, they must contain those conditions you outlined in your preliminary endorsement. They can go further than that. And as I say, if the developer doesn't accept the decision of the ZBA, whether it be a permit or a denial, depending on the language of your preliminary endorsement, you may be able to maintain some of those conditions even before the state.
Oh, and the other point was that we should probably stay away from getting too far down in the weeds with our conditions, but instead set things as much as possible as relatively high level policy goals. And this is actually important because, so one of the concerns that we've had, for example, is where that's been stated is around stormwater management. Well, as part of the normal process, the zoning board, in fact, will be covering a lot of the stormwater management. And a lot of it relates to state DEP requirements. So rather than us forming very detailed down in the weeds conditions there, recommendation was that we focus on fairly high level policy on those points, especially points that would otherwise be negotiated by the zoning board, and instead focus our policy on things that would not be focused by the zoning board. So I was going to propose that we have a working group meeting. It's a public meeting. It's not one of our regular board meetings. And want to talk about dates when we might do that. And before we get into that, ask board members if they have any questions or suggestions. Or
I have a question, or I'm sorry, John, were you
Go ahead, Becky.
Eli, is that will there be a somewhere on the website where townspeople can go to get the most current information regarding what's going on with the process, as well as a place where people can understand why the process goes as it does, and that the town doesn't have a choice to say, no, you can't come here. I just want to be sure that there is somewhere that people can go whenever they want to be up to date on all the information.
So the answer is yes, the intent is there. We have a 40B page.
Right.
But I guess it would probably be good for us to have a standing agenda item so that board members can, board selectmen members can make any comments about what the status is of that page and make requests for updates to it, because it is true that we are receiving quite a bit of feedback or commentary from the public and will over the next several weeks, and we should be able to adjust to that quickly, as quickly as possible on the website. I will make the observation that I have had a number of people send emails where the basic comment is they're not in favor of the project. And it's not clear to me that they understand that we don't actually have the ability to say no to the project.
Right.
So I've clarified this with them, with most of these people when they send me such emails, and I forward them on to Sue and Greg to be included in the record. And some of them actually understand this. I think most of them understand this.
Mhm.
But I do find it a little, I find it curious that I get this feedback, that we're getting this feedback that people are not in favor of the project, even understanding that we don't have the ability to simply say no.
Right.
I guess it's helpful because it lets people know their cultural and emotional state regarding the project. But it is a little confusing.
Well, and there's also, I'm noticing confusion between, the 40B and 40R. And I don't know if we can even just put two simple bullet points. One that very clearly states what our limitations are in terms of we cannot outright say no, and that 40B is one thing and 40R is another, very simply. I don't know how we can make this simpler, but it seems that we have to, because there's still some misunderstandings, and maybe it's people don't know it's on the website or they haven't gone to it.
Well, how about we ask Sue Brown and Tiffany to put a little effort into that particular point, and
I think,
that information. Board members,
Right.
okay?
Yeah, you should probably have two windows next to each other so that people know these are two distinct, different projects.
That's
So-
a good idea, John.
Yeah.
So not to be too nuanced, but the town can deny the request,
Well,
but the developer can go to the state
Yeah.
and get that denial overturned.
Yes, the town can deny the request, but the developer can and
Will
will
be able to go, yes.
and then we get nothing.
go right
Correct.
around this and not.
Yeah.
So I
Right.
understand the nuance, but from the practical aspect, we can deny the request, but it actually won't work.
Works against us.
Right.
Right, I agree. I just don't want to get tripped up on.
Yeah.
I guess I missed, and I didn't say it. It's the 40B, as long as it's going to work for them, will come to town.
Yeah.
So that's the bottom line. And
So-
we have
So I have a question, and Greg, perhaps you can answer this. I saw some emails a week or two ago with regard to this peer review support
Yes,
that I guess provides, well, shall I say, a reality check? I mean, we're going to come up with a whole bunch of stuff, and we don't know necessarily what's reasonable, what's not reasonable. Some of these ideas will be ours. A lot of them will be from people in town, and we've got to kind of collate it and say what makes sense. And is this peer review thing something that probably would make sense to somebody? We would hire somebody, and I understand perhaps the developer will pay for that, to look at it before we go to them and say, I see what your list is, and this is what makes sense, and this is what does not.
so yes, we certainly have the ability to request those funds and to hire our own consultants to review the studies that the developer
Yes.
is advancing. The little bit of the tricky part is timing for that. So absolutely, we have that ability to do once it's before the ZBA. It's a little, it's not as clear, and the developer doesn't have to say yes at this stage of the process. But having said that, we can certainly ask, and I think there's a motivating factor for the developer to say yes, because he does want to get this preliminary endorsement. So if we're saying that'll greatly help us get to that level, then we have a shot of him saying, okay, here's some money to hire your consultants to review the work that we presented to you and to basically double check his work.
Yeah, I'm looking at that, but I'm also looking at it for what we come up with as well, because we've never
Yes.
gone through this before and we just don't know
Mhm.
what makes sense.
Right, and
I
certainly.
mean, we've got common
Okay.
sense, but we still need.
Okay.
And certainly town council plus our consultants on the peer review can help
Yeah.
greatly with it.
All right, I'd be interested in that.
Is there a concern at all though, Greg, that us making a request for consultants is stepping on the toes of the ZBA? I mean, what I understand is that they're the ones that are going to deal with the technical aspects of it. They're the ones that have the understanding of the DEP and those issues. And you know, are we jumping the gun by asking for consultants at this point? And if we do, does it make sense that we coordinate that with the ZBA? Or is that going outside the bounds of this process?
My concern is that in looking over specifically the traffic study and the financials, they build their model based on projects elsewhere, and and probably this is something that should be handled in the workshop, and I shouldn't even go there, but I want to know that they aren't cherry picking the developments that they base their conclusions on. And I think that's something we should handle early, but, and yes, if we want to involve the ZBA, sure, but
Actually,
So
so
it's,
as far as the involvement of the ZBA is concerned, I want to step in front of that one right now.
Mhm.
The ZBA actually has to be hands-off in this negotiation process because they're going to be adjudicating the comprehensive permit. So we're not going to, I believe, be working with them hand in glove on this part of the process.
Mhm.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Greg.
no, you're correct. And yeah, town council emphasized that today, actually.
Yeah. So they can listen to our public meetings, but they should not be speaking up during the negotiation process, and we should be siloing that aspect of this. I'd like to make a comment about the question the peer reviews here, though, because Jeff, as far as stepping on ZBA's toes is concerned, this goes back a little bit to things that the ZBA would be covering as part of the permitting process versus things that they wouldn't actually have in their scope. So for example, the ZBA will have scope over stormwater management. They won't have scope over fiscal impact of the town, whether or not we want or need certain additions to fire department. So where we focus potential peer reviews probably should be in those areas where we go to ask for potential peer reviews, probably should be in those areas where the ZBA would not have domain or purview.
Okay, so a number of people have approached me concerning the conservation land that's around this project, and specifically in terms of the issues of blasting impact. Is that a ZBA issue or is that a Board of Selectmen issue?
That's a good question. I'll preface, so I will say that I know that MECT has met with the developer, and Greg, I think you're going to have to help me out here a little bit. There are some elements of the technical aspects that are in purview of the town and probably in the ZBA, like with respect to what type of explosives are going to be used because of their impact as far as the DEP is concerned. So I think, yeah, some of that is in purview of the ZBA.
Right. So you could have some fairly high level conditions. For example, the project will not impose negative impacts on the surrounding conservation lands, and list a few areas of particular concern. Will not use blasting chemicals that will have the potential of getting into the groundwater. So you keep it at that level, and you leave the more details of that to the ZBA.
We can also specifically ask the ZBA to address those, right?
Right, correct. So another condition, that you expect the developer to have a no net gain in runoff from the perimeter of the property. All stormwater must be handled on site within the property itself. Now, you're not going to design that for the developer at this stage, but the developer then will have to present that kind of a detailed engineering study to the ZBA to satisfy that general goal that you have stipulated, that it has no net increase in stormwater runoff. So those, again, we're starting to get into the weeds a little bit, but that's an example of where you keep it at a fairly high level, and then the ZBA will do a deeper dive into ensuring that broad goal that you've identified is met.
Okay, so that's something I'll bring up again when we have our workshop.
Yes.
Okay, other questions on process? And I'll invite, if that includes, if you have concerns about the process, if you have things that you'd like to have clarified for you, it should include, if you want to have another session with town council for more information and advice, I'm opening the door.
Is that, you mean along the lines of a workshop, not for the meetings that'll be the regular 40B meetings?
So well, let me be specific about the different meetings. So there'll be our regular Board of Selectmen meetings, at which I'll always have a 40B update for the foreseeable future, which gives us an opportunity to discuss things such as the website, or anything that we just need to bring up. There will be the workshop meeting, one or more, with the Board of Selectmen to discuss only the 40B endorsement letter for the LIP. And those meetings will be public, but they won't have the developer present. And then there will be other meetings where we will meet with the developer at 1, 2, 3, however many times. So at some point in the next several weeks, to discuss our negotiating points and to try to develop, come to an agreement on this letter of endorsement. Those are the three categories of 40B meetings. Did that answer the question?
Yes, it did.
There's nothing that prevents, though, Eli, the developer from observing the so-called workshop meetings.
That is absolutely correct. Interesting process, right?
Yeah.
Will we have town council sitting in on any of these meetings?
We can.
I think given his experience with the 40Bs, I think it would be really helpful to be able to have him taking part. Both
Would it
for
make-
observing and hearing, if we have questions. I'm sorry, Ann.
Go ahead.
All done.
Would it make sense for us to have a workshop that lets us talk about the issues that we see and come up with the direction that we're going first, and then involve the town council?
I only think that if he comes early on, he'll keep us from going, as Eli says, he'll keep us from going down rabbit holes. Or
Yeah.
Eli didn't say that, but you know.
Yeah.
I'd be, I mean, we don't have an infinite amount of time. I'd be more inclined to actually bring him in on the first workshop.
Mhm.
Help define the guide rails. Greg, do you think that that's about right?
Yeah, I think that's fine, absolutely. So, yes.
All right, so I think we should probably start with that first workshop. And can we talk about when would be a good day and time? I mean, we can do the regular meeting time around 6:30. We could aim for Thursdays. I would strongly recommend that we do it within like either November 12th or November 19th.
How much groundwork do we need to prepare to do this workshop?
Actually, it was my intent that the initial round of groundwork be done by town council and Sue Brown, and maybe I'll help to coalesce the chat that we had from the initial 40B presentation to develop a list of things that we could use as a framework for that discussion. And the reason I say this is town council actually offered, reason being he's gone through a lot of 40Bs, and he probably has a better basic list of major issues that we can and should consider than we would from the get-go. That's not to exclude us from individually wanting to put items on that list. And what I would suggest is that in parallel, as the town staff start to put together that list, just like residents are sending us comments, we can send Greg and Sue Brown comments and have those folded into the potential list for the workshop.
I asked that question primarily from the point of view of the 12th or the 19th. My own tendency would be to try and go for the 12th so that we have time to have a second meeting, a second workshop in November if we need to. I'm concerned about not squandering the limited time that we have.
I agree completely with Jeff.
So if we can, if some of that framework and our input into that framework, excuse me, can be accomplished by the 12th, I'd prefer to meet on the 12th.
Okay.
If that's convenient for other board members, I'm not trying to dictate here.
And
The 12th, in the evening would work for me. I'm have a medical procedure in the morning.
evening is where I was aiming for. John?
Yeah, the 12th is fine. I mean, the 19th, we have already preliminarily assigned the second forum for that date anyway, correct?
Well, so I had proposed the possibility that we might meet with the developer on that date.
Yes.
I'm going to perhaps put that off to give us a little bit more time to gather.
Get our thoughts together.
This a little bit more cleanly. I don't want to force the process to a little bit too fast. So it's the developer's going to understand that, right? If they understand that we are moving forward, they've been through this before. They have an interest in us coming to a conclusion that supports them. So I think they would rather that we do our due diligence rather than rushing and making a hash of it.
I'm fine with the 12th.
The other consideration in setting a date is what input do we want from other boards and committees? And will they have enough time to meet, discuss, and report on that input?
They're certainly not going to have enough time to meet and discuss and report before the 12th, but they could certainly be there if they wish to at the 12th, and then we could, as an output from the 12th, the meeting on the 12th, plan on refining our instructions to the other boards or our requests to the other boards. And then we could give them a heads up that we may want them to schedule meetings shortly thereafter to start chewing on that.
Yeah. Then I think the 12th really makes the most sense.
I agree.
Annie, you good with that? I don't want to push you into doing something that's not going to work for you.
It'll work. I will make an effort to make sure that any questions that I know I'm going to raise have already been communicated to Greg and Sue. It'll be fine.
Okay.
So, all right, so let's plan on that. Any other items people want to cover on this?
Do we have a time on that?
Time, 6:30?
Works for me.
Okay. Any other points on the 40B process that people want to cover tonight? All right. And yes, there was a comment in the chat asking, will the meetings with SLV be public? And the answer is yes, all of these meetings are open to the public. Whenever the Board of Selectmen meets with the developer, whenever the Board of Selectmen meets as a working group, all of these meetings are public. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. We have 3 items on the consent agenda. One, the Board of Selectmen meeting minutes from October 19th. Second item is to accept a donation from the Friends of Manchester Trees in the amount of $4,500 for the town common trees, and an approval of open door food pantry Drive. Does anybody have any edits that they have not forwarded on for the October 19th minutes?
I passed them in after 6 o'clock tonight. Gail's used to that.
Were they substantive or were they?
No, they were clarifications.
Clarifications.
Yeah, I mean, she had Pleasant Street, it should have been Pleasant Street Extension and
All right, fine.
things like that.
Motion to approve the consent agenda with hearty thanks to Friends of Manchester Trees and Nancy Hammond.
Second,
I'd like to go further than that and say that the board should write a letter to the Friends of the Trees, thanking them for their donation.
Yeah.
Yep, I would agree.
Mhm.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor, Mr. Bodmer Turner?
All in favor of the consent agenda as we just discussed?
That's correct.
Yes.
Ms. Jakes?
Yes.
Ms. Harrison?
yes,
Mr. Round?
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. In correspondence, we have a letter from Nancy Hammond regarding the fiscal year 20 senior tax work-off program. That's just a summary of the senior tax work-off program. And thanks to Nancy for managing that.
Mhm.
Question in the chat from Sheila Hill. What is the communication plan for the last meeting, especially the chat room? Sheila, you're going to have to, I think if you want to clarify that question in email to me later, maybe we can be more specific. I don't really understand the question, and I don't think it's a topic for covering in this meeting right now, but I'll be happy to talk to you about it in email or in person. All right. Let's do the town administrator's report.
Okay, but just quickly, we are working on this, on categorizing all the chat questions and comments, and we'll have a part of the website. We do have the recording and the chat on the website, and so we will get that that up as well. So just real quickly, obviously, big day tomorrow. Elections are finally upon us. Actually, they've been upon us for the last few weeks. A tremendous number of people have already voted. I think we were close to 2,000 voters. Already,
Wow.
which is huge. And we get another 1,000 tomorrow, and that'll be a tremendous turnout. It's impressive to see. So hopefully things will continue to go very smoothly. A real shout out to Sharon George, who's our interim town clerk. She's been managing this extremely well. A very experienced town clerk, and it's great to have her having her running our elections right now. So we're hopeful for a smooth day tomorrow, and all hands are on deck if needed to manage crowds and to take care of things that might come up. Just a quick update, police contract will be meeting informally with some of the folks involved to see if we can move things along, and whether or not we will be going to the JLMC or not will depend on the outcome of those conversations. And as you know, budget development is in full swing. Department heads have submitted their initial requests to me and Andrea. We are in the early stages of compiling those, and we'll begin our meetings with the department heads as we prepare a draft budget to present to you in the finance committee the 1st of December. And so that is underway. At the school collaborative meeting last week, there was discussion of, how do we best handle a lot of unknowns in the school budget for next year. Obviously, the COVID wild card is what is driving that uncertainty. And so there's some talk about, presenting a budget that assumes that school is back in operation full time. And what is sort of dubbed as a COVID supplement that might be presented. And that might be presented, if necessary, later at a special meeting. Those are just some initial thoughts. We will continue to talk about that as the budget season progresses. Don't need to make final decisions on that until end of February. So we do have some time, and we'll see how things evolve over the next few months. As we started out the meeting, Eli mentioned some of the new orders that the governor issued, and we continue to watch carefully how things are progressing with cases. We continue to do pretty well here in Manchester, so hats off to people, and just a plug to keep being vigilant as tired as it is, as tiring as it is to keep at it. If we can keep at it and we can get through these next few months, it'll be a big plus for us. The next few weeks in particular, I think, are going to be telling in terms of where this COVID pandemic is headed in our neck of the woods. So people can continue to be vigilant. That's what we need to see. So continue to monitor and be ready to shift gears if we need to. So that's all I needed to do. Update with you for tonight. And again, thank you for your time and patience.
And now I'm unmuted again. Any questions from board members on the town administrator's report?
I do have one question. Greg, I'm assuming that the restaurants were notified about the decision of the last meeting concerning all the sidewalk
Yes.
stuff going away on the 9th.
Yes. It looks like a couple are shutting down early this week. We may get some of those barriers out this week. We'll confirm with them that they have wrapped up.
Yeah, I noticed that the mooring has already taken their tent down.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So we may get some of those barriers removed this week.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So I have no other matters as may not have been reasonably anticipated by the chair for the using double, triple, or whatever negative. And I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, roll call vote. Mr. Bodmer Turner.
Yes.
Ms. Jakes.
Oh, yes.
Ms. Harrison.
Fine with me?
Mr. Round.
Yep.
Mr. Bowling votes yes.
Thank
for
you,
your
Greg.
Thank you
Eli.
all.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah,
Good night.
good night.
Good night, all.
Good night, all.
Bye.